I'm curious if either of you would weigh in on a question I've got. Is there anything that could have changed the outcome, given that it was a competitive environment of Ethernet versus Token Ring?
The one thing that sticks in my mind, and I don't know if this is true, is that Ethernet was developed by a community, and the Token Ring was really an IBM only thing. And when you have community of forces contributing for good ideas for everyone's benefit, it tends to move faster and have solutions that meet the needs of more people than if one organization is driving it. That's sort of my takeaway. Joe?
You have to go back so far, I think, to try and change things that it becomes very hard. Certainly the community is a strong issue. The degree of simplicity, because it could have been community driven but been complex, and
Community would have simplified it.
yeah, I think so. I mean, just the incredible vision of keeping it so ridiculously simple. When I worked at Ford, one of the things before I took the job, one of the things that amazed me was I went to a trade show and I looked at 2 ATM switches. One was the size of an apartment-sized refrigerator, and it had a 1.2 gigabit throughput, and it cost some insane amount of money from a very, very big name provider, and it never shipped and never worked. And Francois Bitz, who was the switch architect at Ford, delivered a 2.5 gig switch in 2RU that worked flawlessly and had a cost of goods of about 5% of that monstrosity that never worked. And I watched him in the time I was there drive complexity out of every system he could. He was relentless in terms of saying, no, come back to me with something simpler. And I think that's one of the great things about Ethernet is it just has been going for the simplest answer possible. And that meant, for example, compared to Token Ring or FDDI, you look at gate count, you look at chip size, you look at analog front-end logic. Not that the early Ethernet analog front-ends weren't a real nightmare to get to work, but I mean, so much of it was just simple that people could do it.
I've got to disagree on that. I've listened to this Ethernet is simple over, and I've said it for years. But the truth is that Ethernet is just as complex as the, well, okay, FGDI got a little over the top. But, there was nothing simple about the Vampire taps. There was nothing simple about the first Ethernet over coax.
And they didn't survive.
The whole DNC connector coax. That was incredibly complicated stuff, and the INROP came about as a way of testing interoperability between all these non-interoperable implementations. The one thing that you did have going for you was that it was open enough that a bunch of people could try. And then you had open forums like Interop to beat the bugs out. But it wasn't simple.
Well, but Interop was beating the bugs out of IP, not Ethernet.
Well, it depends on
What
it
vendors
depends on where the bugs showed up.
It depends on what vendors you're talking to, too.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in on this.
Yeah, before Jeff does, I want to credit Jeff with some of that. I mean, I've been going to 802 forever, and one of the rules of 802 is that a technical proposal has to get 75% vote, as opposed to 50. And Jeff and 75% have stopped a lot of insane proposals that came in from various people. And because of that, it kind of maintained its sanity, in my opinion, over the years. And I've actually run into that 75% myself on the other side of the table. But
yeah, it takes a lot of the jitter out of the decision process.
yes.